right, it's another episode. We've got the whole gang here, Tommy and Seth. Good morning. It's Tuesday.
Episode number 5. Woohoo! We're on a roll here, boys. We're on a roll.
Going into 5.
3 weeks.
We have made it.
I can't tell you if it's a success or not, but we're still doing it. So, you know, you're stuck listening to us for another week, I guess. Awesome. So what are we talking about this week? We got some any random news coming out? The DA 100 exam changed. I have not taken it. I can't speak to it. Seth has not taken it. We can't speak to that.
I've not taken it either.
Yeah,
Tommy?
so I actually just took it since we didn't have long podcasts on Thursday, and I had all this time on my hands since we missed out on 30 minutes of extra
Funness.
funness. I said the exam, and I'm like, well, I didn't study for it, but it was kind of like might as well try it. You're saying my idea because I took the original exam that retired.
Yeah.
I have to say, if anyone's took the original exam to get the Microsoft Certified Trainer, I think it was like the 779,
Okay.
and this is the new one.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely a better, more in real business case questions.
Okay.
The other one was always like kind of like adventure works and sales and year to date. You're like, okay, but this one actually had like ideas of a business is trying to migrate to this. Here's their situations.
Oh.
So it
Okay.
was pretty good. There were a few things I gave some feedback where there's some terms or phrases I've never heard anyone say. I don't know if I can say it or not because how
You can't say it. You can't say it.
but there are definitely ones I'm like, yeah, I have no idea what that is. Like not even like the term, but it was like, the sales team is trying to implement blah, blah, blah. And it was like, yeah, no one uses that. So
That's
But
amazing.
you know about it.
yeah.
But you knew about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's
That's
I wrote
awesome.
the feedback. I'm like, one of my goals for this company would be to get them to use the right terminology. So
I love it. I love it. That's amazing. Okay, good. So for those of you who are taking or thinking about taking the DA 100, so Tommy, would you say if you took the previous one, would you probably be able to take the second one without a ton of studying? Would it be very
yeah.
similar? Okay.
Oh yeah. So they definitely did a good job too with your like from the technical side to again from the business side of like those types of questions. So as long as you know your basic Power Query and your DAX, and I think the biggest thing there's a lot on row level security. There's a lot on like how do you share and distribute.
Yep.
Like
All they need to do is listen to the podcast. You'll know how to share and distribute.
Yeah,
We already did this. Yeah, we already
except
prepped
this
you
is
for DA.
opinions and nothing is based in fact. So
Hey,
They
their
did a good
opinions
job,
now
though.
that maybe we're solidifying standards as we speak. We're making it up as we go.
yeah, right. The opinions
We're already
expressed here are
creating
not
new
endorsed
publish
by
functionality, man. Right?
Yeah.
Like we already talked about the button. Just
more
wait till it
buttons
shows up.
desktop.
That's
The
amazing.
opinions expressed here are not endorsed or consented by Microsoft. So.
Yeah, the disclaimer at the beginning of this.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said something interesting, Tommy. Though, like this is part of you're talking about the normal certification process, right? Like MCA or whatever.
Well, yeah, there's no longer MCA.
Oh, there
Or,
isn't.
yeah, it is. It's Microsoft's data associate. So
Data associate. Okay, because you said Microsoft Certified Trainer, and that's a completely different thing.
that's
Right.
what the original exam was. You had to take 2 exams to get the well, if you took 1 exam, you became a certified trainer.
Oh, really?
And then if you took both exams, which I never understood this, then you became a Microsoft certified associate. So
Seems
an MCP.
backwards.
No, I'm sorry, not trainer, professional.
Oh,
Microsoft
got it.
certified professional. Yeah.
MCP. See, okay, this
MCP.
is what I was like.
Yeah,
Confused me a little bit because back when I was consulting, like the Microsoft Certified Trainer, you have to go through a lot of stuff
Yeah.
to get that
Yes.
title.
Yeah.
Because I know there are a few people that re-upped. I think Ginger Grant was one recently. I saw some tweets coming through, so
Mhm.
I didn't. I was making sure there was a delineation there because that's a little bit more accelerated than
Yes.
some of the the
And I
certs.
think
Okay.
some of their links are outdated because you take the exam, you're like, hey, look into being MCT. And I clicked on like what is it, like marketing value measure, like measures value market,
Mm-hmm.
like to get your ranking. And I
Yeah.
go to the site and there's nowhere to register. It just says login. It's like, okay. And I was trying to Google, it's like a new site. So I was like, all right, I may have to talk to someone else.
I like it. All right. Well, good. Well, this actually dovetails very well into our topic for today. We're talking about just in general what measures success for a BI team, and so a DA 100 exam is one of those thresholds. You can throw that as a measurement of success in your team. How many people on your team have been able to pass that exam? Now, I'm not sure if I would 100% say if you pass the DA 100 exam, you're 100% on board and you know everything about Power BI. I mean, this is kind of like I'd say a surface touch on all the things that are Power BI. It does a good job of giving you a good rounded expertise. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts there? Like, is a DA 100 exam a good indicator of a Power BI professional at this point?
It might be for a professional, but not necessarily for like a BI team at an organization.
Okay.
So if you're dealing with like the internal team or just a data analyst at a company, I think those are two separate things.
I would
I
agree.
forget. I forget. Maybe it was you, Tommy, or I don't know. I consume a lot of content from people. And it wasn't my idea, but like there was this thought that somebody was putting a business person through some sort of training material or had to pass something. And I don't know if it was the certification, but it was some level of like, hey, I know how to engage with the content you as the BI team are creating, right? I know the fundamentals, so it lets them like play with gold standard stuff or something like that. I like that idea. I don't think necessarily, if you're on the BI team, you better know, and we're doing Power BI, like you better know it, So,
Well, I think there's.
as far as certifications are concerned, I don't know
I feel like
a ton of value.
I feel like a DA 100 would be like the minimum bar, right? That's the minimum bar you need to hop over. But like with
Yeah.
stuff that we're doing, like the amount of measures that we're managing, or not measures and or deployment, the DA 100 exam is not going through Tabular Editor. DA 100 exam is not going through ALM Toolkit. There are some things that when you start talking like a BI team, right? The team stuff skills that I think we need. There's a little bit more, I think, to that, and some additional check boxes I think I'd want to hit. Make sure our team has these other skills that we're looking for. I don't think there's a test out there at all that I'm aware. And again, I'm a good fan of testing. I think it does a good job of giving you where you are. I'm a horrible test taker, honestly, seriously. Like to me, I get nervous when people are like, "Oh, you gotta pass this test to get to this thing," and I'm like, "Oh crap, I gotta study." And I just want to know it and know that I'm good at what I'm doing there. So I've shied away from the DA 100 exam. There's actually like I think there's 70 something. There's a Power BI exam. I don't know which one's 778 or something like that. I took it cold turkey, didn't even study for it, and I passed it, but barely. Luckily, I passed it just a bit above Seth, which is a good thing. But
This was back in the day.
this was way back in the day. This is way back in the day. So, but I would say
Never forget.
I just wanted to know the things, right? I think an exam is good, but I feel like you can study for an exam and not understand what's going on, and I don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you can, and that's why I don't like. So, what are the benefits of the exam, right? Like, I know that a number of people in your organization, right? It could be a valuable metric for your organization because there's, I think, licensing, effects, right? So there's a positive net effect for, a lot of your folks having Microsoft certifications.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there is a huge disconnect, I think, between somebody who studies something to pass an exam and somebody who understands what they're doing in the context of the tool, right?
No, I mean, I took it purely for like two reasons. Like, it's definitely from a career point of view, and then two, you like you look on social media and see all these people passing. You're like, I should be able to do this, and then that keeps creeping in your mind, like, I should be able to pass this. And then I'm the same way, Mike, where I was like scared to take it. I'm like, man, how embarrassing would that be? But it was kind of like, this is what compared to other exams you took in college, like this is what we actually like to do, and we do it every day.
Yes.
and like some of those questions you're looking at, you're like, don't come with me with that.
Yes,
Then you'd be the same. So
I
because
know. I
it's
know.
not like, it's not like chapter 13, of biology. So
Yes.
it's
Oh,
definitely
don't get me on
something.
chemistry, man.
Yeah.
I squeaked way through and can't handle chemistry, man. I cannot handle it. There's a lot of things I can do, but chemistry is not one of them.
Well, going back to the KPIs for a BI team, and I think
Yeah.
one thing we were talking about that disconnect, I think it starts with, and this is like any department, team, or organization, but I think let's talk about a BI team or an individual.
Yep.
When you're talking about like what KPI should be, focused on, you start like, well, what, and you said this, Mike, in the chat. Well, how do we evaluate success? So let's talk
Yes.
about how do we first evaluate what does success mean for a BI team?
This is a big question, I feel like.
Yeah.
And you can go a lot of routes, I think, with this as well. I'm gonna let you guys talk first. I have opinions too. We all have opinions.
So are we talking like kind of high level overall? How do we evaluate, the success of the BI team?
Yes.
Well, I think first and foremost, are you can you answer yes to the question? Are you providing value to the business? Right, like that's the whole purpose of a BI team, is to surface up insights that allow the business to understand the data that is flowing throughout the organization. Secondarily to that, typically, it's are you enabling the business to discover data? And I think that's where Power BI is, a fantastic tool, because it hits those very hard, both in a business case and an enterprise case, right? Where you're surfacing up those insights in a on an enterprise level, where you have the standardized reporting that goes across the organization, and then at the same time enables the different business units to really analyze and dig into their own data. So I think ultimately, like, those are the two key deliverables. And then third, on top of that, I think as a I was going to say tertiary. I think the third thing in there would be, are you instilling trust, right? Because that is absolutely a core component of being a successful BI team. Is do your internal or external customers trust the data that you're throwing through the reports?
I like that idea of trust. And actually, that's where my first mind went. My first thought was, Power BI has given us the ability to do promoted and certified data sets. How do we start getting people to use those things? So, to your point, I definitely think, if we roll out Power BI and it starts growing from an adoption standpoint, and again, I'm going to use some of the terms that Microsoft uses. Monthly active users, I think, is definitely a KPI that you have somewhere. Who's trying to touch and who's logging into PowerBI.com. And I think what you find initially, particularly in something that you need to measure at some level, is the requests that come to you where people are asking for permission to get to things, right? If people are actively seeking you out and trying to get access. I just had a request from a client today. Someone was in the finance team. Hey, I need access to said report. So I went back and we need to have a plan around, like, okay, does this guy have access? Yep, he does. Okay, add them in, give them access, right? So those requests, when you start handling those requests, I think that's a measure of success. That's something you can tangibly see how many users are hitting things. And then I'd also point to your data quality question here. Is I think that's another really refined point here is, are you able to see data sets using certified data sets? So this is another, maybe a bit more tangible measurement here, right? Are we seeing people copying data sets? Are there a lot of data sets named the same way, but are the same, I don't know how you quantify this yet from like a, KPI standpoint, but what you really want is you want a couple really large data models that are servicing many different reports. So if you're doing something right, we should be able to quantify what's the average number of reports hanging off of a model. Is it 3? Is it 2? Is it 1? Which certified models have how many reports hanging off of them? So there's some interesting like dynamics, I think, that go along with that too.
So I actually took it a different way than you guys in terms of evaluating success, and I think it's actually from out of college. The first company I worked for, my boss's boss, who was interviewing me, he basically said, let's say we hire you, and a year from now we high five each other because it worked out so well. Why is that? And I remember thinking about that like, one, to try to think of a good answer, but I loved that question in terms of, if I think, about a year from now at
Mm,
CompTIA, like, let's say a year from now, my boss high fives me, kind of thing. Why? Kind of thing, compared to where
yeah.
we are now.
Yep.
And I think that's the big thing. So obviously, are people using reports? Great. But it's always, and I think especially for us, you said adoption. So adoption means from the point in time now, or point in time that you give, what would constitute, better or increased adoption, growth of the platform.
But isn't this whole issue around organizations here has been we've made Excel hell. We've gone through and we've allowed people to make Excel models or Excel worksheets that just get shared via email. And I think part of what you're seeing here is the adoption of Power BI centralizes some of that knowledge that was traditionally just handed between individuals in Excel sheets. I think
Mhm.
the idea of what we're doing here, if like from a self-service BI thing, right? We're trying to provide a Power BI environment where people can actually go in and figure things out on their own and answer their own questions. In addition to, now we've got certified data sets too. So I think you want to see volumes of that work that was traditionally untracked and called shadow IT, right? If that shadow IT work, I think you want to start seeing that migrating over to this new platform.
You make a really interesting point there, Tommy, and you're touching on it, Mike. But I do think that a measure of success in an organization could absolutely be how much time are you saving across the organization,
Mhm.
Yes.
right? Because there are huge opportunities,
How do you,
right, to have a BI team
yes.
integrate with business units and be like, all right, what are you guys doing manually in Excel? Like,
Mhm.
who's spending the most time rerunning the thing that feeds the thing that feeds the thing that feeds the thing, and how long does that take? Okay, if you're what, Mike, even in the past, right?
I've
Like
done it.
how many I spend 5 hours a week,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
pushing data. You're like, that's a huge opportunity to invest the 40 hours or whatever as a one-time cost to save, the exponential downstream of like just manual. I'm not accomplishing anything new or good for my organization other than producing a number.
There's so much to unpack in that. There's a lot there, I think, that you're talking about. Because again, I'm all about like something I can measure. I literally want a goal or like a number or something that we can at least hit. I keep thinking SMART goals. Like one of the things that's a challenge here is I think taking that so this is what we have to do to the clients, right? I have to talk to them like, hey, what were you doing in Excel? Okay, that took you 20 hours once a month to run the numbers, verify that the report was good, and send it out. Okay, so there's two things that you're adding as a BI team. You're adding capability, right? I can make that decision 12 times a year, and it takes me 20 hours to make the single decision. So that's the measurement that we're talking about there. And then when you talk about adding Power BI, we automate this process. I mean, that's what we did. We've done this before. We've automated a process that took 20 hours down to like an hour or less to refresh all the data. And now we're doing it 365 times a year. So what you're actually measuring is man hours saved over time. And I think when you start using that as part of the conversation, you have to be intentional about knowing that's what you want to measure as you go into these engagements, because you lose, like, so I'm very like, you're going to lose the data. Like you lose that, you just do it and build it for them. And they're like, yay, this is great. But you have no way of quantifying what were they doing previously and how it improved over time. And so now instead of spending 20 hours 12 times a year, we would have had to spend 20 hours 365 times a year in man hours, whatever that number is. It's $100,000 or whatever, right? Now you can do that. You've added capability, but now you got decisions. You've added, the ability to make a decision about your data at any day throughout the business year, and that's adding capability, which is very hard to quantify, I think.
That's the. I'm gonna make one point then, Tommy, and then I'll let you go.
This is a hot topic.
That's a force multiplier though, right? Like it's
Mhm.
not just the time it takes the person to generate it.
Yes.
It's when do you want to see that metric? Because
Yes.
every time you answer, I want to see that, that's 20 hours.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And that's where, like in the past, man, there were I recall a couple engagements where it was like 2 weeks
Yep.
to generate the previous month numbers.
Yep.
and they were getting it like the week before the next month began,
It's not a way to run a
right?
business.
Like, and you automate that,
Yep.
and it's like, boom, there they are.
Yep.
Boom, there they are. Like that is huge.
Yes.
That's huge impact to a business. Sorry,
So
Tommy.
I'm actually gonna argue that a little because
Do it. Argue.
I'm a little
Do it.
I'm a little sensitive to people requesting shortcuts rather than impact. I see what you're saying, but I think one from a KPI point of view, like you're absolutely right. You know, whether it's creating a power app or just a way that cuts the process time in half for a team is wonderful. But I think the biggest thing is, okay, how do you what's the more or less what's the DAX formula? What's the model? How do you measure that, and what are you measuring that against? So what are you looking at in whether it's in a report or or what data are you looking at to say we are doing a better job of this or we are achieving this
This is okay. So let me
for this instance?
Yeah. So let's just talk about this example. And again, this is going to be a topic I'm pretty sure we're going to have to hit this again multiple times because again, I feel like this is a really large topic. So Tommy, to your point, I think that's a great, how do we quantify this? And I think here's how I would see this working. I think this is a measure. This is a KPI that works very well with the Center of Excellence. So I think I'm a big proponent of the Center of Excellence, and I ran a call center for a number of years. And I can't tell you how much wasted time and effort I spent responding to emails one at a time. They would email me a problem, I would respond back with an answer. So some measures of success here, particularly around, I think what you're talking about, Tommy, is how do we quantify the enhancements of this? I think for this specific objective, we need to have a Center of Excellence established. So that should be one of our KPIs. We should have one of those established. Another KPI we should be rolling around with this one is how many business teams are integrating with the Center of Excellence. That's another kind of, I think, key KPI. Is it HR? Is it sales? Is it distributions and shipping? Who's integrating with that Center of Excellence team? And then once you're in that wheelhouse of the team, now we're talking a bit refinement around those metrics. And the idea here is when someone comes to us and we say, hey, we're going to do, I don't know, it's a BI challenge, whatever. You set up some kind of challenge around it and you say, bring us your hardest Excel files. We'll get the Center of Excellence together and we'll ideate how to make this better. So then we actually go pound the business and find, show me where your weakest process is. Show me where this thing is the hardest thing to do. Bring that to our team. And then you document what it was, how long it took you, and what was the frequency of the decisions. And then throw out the challenge. Let your BI team figure it out and say, all right, spend 3 days figuring out how to do this better. How can we make this faster? How can we increase the number of decisions and then measure it again? And I think to that point, specifically around like a project by project basis, that's something you have to bring to the Center of Excellence. And then at the Center of Excellence, you have to be intentional about recording what it was and what it came and turned into. And there's probably about a whole bunch of other things, but I'm thinking, Tommy, about that specific question.
Yeah.
What do you think about that idea?
I can see it, but I think there's so many steps to get that one metric. And a lot of barriers to get that right.
But it's dollars though. Like
it's dollars, but it's also not necessarily something you can automate or you can look on an ongoing basis. So you have to set up a structure for that team that they're going to input how much time they spend on a subjective way, unless you have access to their timesheet, saying how much time they're spending. And again, compared to what? Are you looking for 70% time saved? So I took this a very different way because when you talked about it before with, how do we evaluate success for a BI team? Well, it is adoption. It's constantly the adoption.
Sure.
It's, from adoption, from people being comfortable and understanding how to use Power BI to understanding new reports that are out there and to driving that culture. So it's making sure that our reports and our content's top of mind. It's just as important. It's information that not only is valuable to them, but something that they need to go back to or gives them a reason that they need to go back to that report on an ongoing basis.
There's so many.
And also for us too, when we're creating reports and we're spending the time building reports, are we spending the time on the right people, or are the reports actually quality reports? So like if we spend 20 hours on a report, like let's say in this example, you create this report that's time saver. It took us 25 hours. It saves them 5 hours. and they don't use it, what the frequency that they use it is every month. Is that quality? Are we improving the process? So I for me, like when we had this topic, I kind of actually had a few like KPIs that you can get from the audit log or from the usage, where you're actually looking at a rolling 30 days and 60 days reports, like views of reports.
Yep.
So one, keeping top of mind. So how many views have you gotten for reports on the 30 days and 60 days in previous period? And then looking at how many views you're getting for reports launched in the last 30 days or 60 days.
Mhm.
So how many reports have you launched within the last month or two? And then looking at that 30-day split for those reports. So if a report was created a month ago, how many views it gotten the first 15 days compared to the last 15 days?
Mm-hmm.
And is it matching an average? If it, and then you can actually, you're looking at those reports, and those reports, how much time you spent on this particular report. And then, so those are kind of like, I think, the high level. And then it's really, like, how many days since reports. And I think one thing I would love to create in a measure, and I thought about it as we were going through this topic, is what's the distribution that 80/20 is 80% of my reports or my top reports being viewed by 20% of the people? What's that distribution?
How do you 20% of the people? So what do you mean? Looking at one person across multiple reports?
So let's say one report had 100 views and 10 users,
Mhm.
and two of the users made up 80 of the views.
Gotcha.
So
Look at the distribution of users by view.
yeah, the outliers kind of thing. Like, is it being used across the team? And then like, how many days? So those are kind of, to me, when we're talking about KPIs for report, that kind of goes into adoption.
Yep.
Because we're not just that overall number of reports. You're looking at that rolling days. You're saying, where were we last, year to date, obviously, compared to previous year? Like, where were we last year for certain reports or workspace apps now, I guess, since we all agreed from last call. But and like, are people still utilizing reports that were created last year? Are the time we're spending on development now making sense? Like, because if people aren't looking at a report, let's say this is very common, you launch a report, it gets a bunch of views the first week and then just drops.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think about that, and whose fault is that? Is there a problem with the report, or is that a problem with like the users, or was there because there's something there in terms of there's some value not being shown there. So to me, that's part of a KPI.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and like everything you said about like the time being saved, I absolutely agree is something you should measure. But I think how to get that, that's how to actually get that into a model or into a table is very, very difficult.
I'm feverishly writing down notes here because there's so many. Again, I have so many thoughts on this. I feel like we're diverting the conversation into two topics, right? There's one about, and you were talking very specific, Tommy, around a single report. And I like a couple things I want to say.
I'm talking all the organization in general.
Yeah, but most of the KPIs you were doing was a report by report basis, right? A rolling 30. And again, you could aggregate all the little reports into like bigger report aggregations, right? So some of the ones you were mentioning here was like the number of reports published per month, right? So as your team as a BI team, how much work is your team churning out? And is there a goal for that, right? So, we've got to be able to produce, and again, as an expectation of, again, maybe I'm thinking about this a bit differently, because I believe, Tommy, you're kind of like, your team is the BI team, and you have the rest of the organization that kind of consumes what you're developing.
Exactly.
And that's a thing a little bit different in certain companies, because you're going to see other companies where it's not as heavy driven from the IT team. It's more about the Center of Excellence team teaching other teams how to do things too. So I think there's a bit of a mix here, right? Potentially.
And that would be very different KPIs.
Maybe not. Maybe it's not the same thing. I mean, I think I really like the idea of doing 30 days to 60 days usage. How many reports are we putting out per month? I mean, these are we retiring old reports? How many do we retire and replace? I mean, I think those are good health metrics of like, as we're spending money on that BI team, what is their output churn that we should be expecting back to the business?
So Tommy, you made a good point, and I think if I'm going to back up 20 minutes to the origination of the conversation, I think I should have stated first, like let's talk about the BI team goals, and the KPIs are the measurement of the things that we can automate to achieve the goals of the BI team, right?
Right.
So
Ooh.
maybe I conflated a little bit in here, because realistically, you're right. Like the KPI is the measurement of these things going forward.
Yes.
Where this like flipped the switch on me was I was going to be like, yeah, but Tommy, goals, like we can use those, but I'm like, no, wait, a goal is where we're trying to go. So aligning back to where you're at, right? Like what are those things that we, I think a lot of the KPIs that you were talking about, as far as adoption, understanding how people are using things, like, falls into the value. Like, what value are you providing? We can show value because people are using our things. I think we could also do a lot of KPIs around the automation of timeliness of data, right? Like monitoring your pipeline, like understanding
pipeline
like throughout
failures?
that price, right? How many pipelines do you have? Are they functioning properly? Do you know that the data was refreshed in the time it needed to be before people start interacting with the reports, or are you missing, right? So I think there's a huge amount of like those sorts of KPIs drive towards trust, right, and value of the overall goals. But those would definitely be something that you could automate, that you could plug into the specific KPIs that you're measuring per pipeline, per report, etc.
I like that SLA on data sets. I think that's a good topic.
Yeah.
Right. If you're going to build a
yeah.
report, you're going to guarantee like there's an SLA that goes with it. Hey, we can get this data done by 9 a.m. and then you measure it. That's your goal. Every day, 9 a.m. And if you make that mark, that's another tick in the win box, right? That's building your performant back end process,
Right.
And make sure it doesn't like. Did even how many failures on data set refreshes are you getting?
Yeah.
Another one, right? If you can't get the data there, you can't use the report, or the report has stale information in it. And again, if we're talking about building capability, that stuff just better rock and roll and run.
DataMark actually has a great PowerShell script to take. It was originally made for data flows, but you can easily change it. But it's basically for one workspace to get all the refresh time, like all the refresh data, and put into CSV. So we pull that in too, and like we have goals too, like getting the refresh above a 95% success rate, and then getting like the overall refresh time. Because I mean, my biggest focus, I think it's like 1 through 3 is the adoption and the growth and the trust, but obviously it's still important under here too to monitor is, are you creating good models too?
Yeah.
Like if your average refresh time in the service is 15 minutes, like you may have a problem.
And I was going to go there because there is a really nice report that pulls all the data for you, and you can integrate it into that data set. So that is a data set you can go get with going to get the workspace, or an A SKU, or I guess it would be the A SKU, or embedded capacity report. So there's reports that actually help you. Premium metrics report, I think is what it's called, or something like that. But it does that
Not
exact thing.
per user.
True, not per user. I don't know if how they're going to report on that one, but you do get that in other areas, right? So if you're doing an A SKU or premium SKUs, like you do get to see what's the refresh time, what's the average refresh time. And I was even going to go out here on a limb and say, if you're looking at a well-performing model, you look at all the queries that are coming back from that model, which you can in this report, and you look at the average query time returned, or the average query time for that model. And if the average query time is very high, 10,000 milliseconds or 10 seconds per, whatever that number is, you've got a problem at the model level. And I was literally digging through models the other day, and I found measures. I was finding measures in models that could have been using a variable that did not. And I played with it, and I said, hey, I'm going to take this one measure. It was repeated, 4 times in some kind of switch statement. And then I turned one of those repeated measures and made it a variable, because then I'm going to evaluate it once and reuse it multiple times. When I did that, the measure got a 66% improvement in speed. So, like, there's probably like little things like that all over the place that are just around that people have built, and you're finding these things, right? So finding that kind of stuff and be able to sniff through your models, the BIM files, now you're talking like,
Yeah.
how do we text extract things? Is there a way for us to kind of look at measures and figure out they're written the right way? There's all kinds of really, I think, interesting KPIs can go around that to see if you're writing good models, if you're building models that are performant. I found the article from DataMark. Extract refresh metrics from your entire Power BI workspace. I think that's what you're talking about, Tommy, right?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna put that
And
in the chat
we
window.
combine the refreshed, like the count of refresh and the average refresh with the views. So then we can look and see like, okay, this report refreshed 20 times in the last 7 days and had 5 views in the last 30 days.
Mhm.
So there's a problem there because then you're putting a strain on the workspace or your capacity
Mm-hmm.
that's not needed.
Ooh.
So, and that's part of that, and again, KPI too, to, that you're delivering the best content, that you're not delivering the best strain. And then again, looking at the success and failure, or looking at your biggest reports, that's like, why are we refreshing it 5 times a day?
Views to refresh ratio.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I'll watch this again and then I'll write it down.
I'm literally doodling all the ideas here of
Yeah.
like, I've got like views to refresh ratio. That would be a good one. How many views have you gotten to how many times you're refreshing the report?
I'm
Or you could even do
do that
like
as soon as I get off this call.
views to refresh time, right? If our refresh time is 3 hours and we're only getting 3 or 4 views, is that worth our time?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like I said, I'm definitely taking this from this whole idea. I'm definitely taking from when we said success. Like if I'm high-fiving our BI team here, a year from now, it's because we know people are relying on Power BI. They're relying on their reports. They're making better decisions. They know where to go to find information to act. They're using the reports in meetings. The content in Power BI is just as important as looking at their email in the morning.
Yep.
So that's where I start from success. And then from the key, like the goal is, we don't have any clutter in our reports, that every report is having some sort of views in a recent basis, in a recent trend line.
Mm-hmm.
That every report that we publish, has a long life, or has a consistent life, so to speak.
But Tommy, how do you measure clutterness in an automated fashion?
So you can pull in all the PowerShell, you can pull in all the scripts to pull like the usage, and then you just look at it per workspace. You look at reports that haven't been viewed in 15 days by 2 people. And if you see a lot of those reports, you look at the report, you go, okay, this probably doesn't need to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to be a deterrent. It's going to be a fork in the road for someone if they're looking at a Power BI app, or just what word am I thinking for?
Oh, I think you're also too, Tommy, like, right, if no one's using the report, Power BI by default turns off the refreshing for that report.
Yeah, how many reports are
how many reports are physically
it's the ultimate sign of failure,
right? So I would say, so I'm actually writing things down again. I'm slating my thoughts around this, right? So there's 2 KPIs, right? There should be definitely, if you're going to make a KPI around number of reports produced per month, you better also darn well have another KPI that says number of reports retired per month. So one of the things I get I'm really frustrated about is the fact that we plan for development, but we never plan for obsolescence. It's not part of the plan. And we need to have some level of planning around obsolescence. You're going to build a lot of reports. Some of them are going to work and stick. Some of them are not. And you need a process to turn those off. Put them in a deprecated folder, stop them refreshing, move them to a workspace where people can't have access to them. What is the quintessential IT thing you do? You turn off access and see who complains. Like, no one knows who's using what. You just turn stuff off, and if someone's whining about it, they were using it. You turn it back on. Like, you could do things like that, and particularly around, a lot of these metrics can point to the areas where you are using the most compute and turn those off first because you're saving space or memory or compute. I mean, this is a commodity. This is a limited resource that you're paying for. You've got to use it wisely. And so you don't want to just have models refreshing for the heck of it. I've seen this happen on premium capacities all the time. An organization will buy a premium capacity, a P1, everyone will jump onto it and be like, yeah, this is the best thing ever. And everyone's got reports running and refreshing. There's no bill back to the business groups. No one knows who's running where. And there's one team who's got this massive report. Like, we need this report. We have to have all the financial data and everything we need in one massive model, and it eats up everything for everyone else. And so everyone else is like, my reports are slow. But that's that one guy abusing the workspace, and he's eating that whole workspace up for you. I mean, this happens. This is a real thing. So we've got to be able to figure out how to push back.
Like?
My reports are slow. He's a little guy. He's
a man of many voices.
Yeah. Awesome.
You went deep last week.
You know, I have so many
I'm
skills.
turning you off.
Yes, exactly. But I think that's a thing. We got to plan for both ends of the spectrum.
I like that idea. That's a really good one, dude. Deprecation process.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we've tried, but I think there's probably a better process around. By the way, I'm still struggling with the word I was thinking about before, so we'll take that offline because that's bugging the freaking. So, anyways, red herring. Call it a red herring. Anyways, let's go back to where we're at. So, what we used to do is like we would look at reports that haven't been viewed or like 1 or 2 views in 45 days.
Yep.
And those reports would basically notify the user saying, by the way, this report's going to be retired in a week. If you have any, issues with that, please reply.
Ooh, I like this. So you're tying. So now this is beyond just measurements and KPIs.
Yeah.
You're tying action to it now. So there's a process of when low usage, trigger an automate, trigger an email. I like that.
Yeah. Other thing too is we've talked all about the quantitative side. With if you guys have like dynamic customer voice, you can create like the variables and do a few things, but also getting that qualitative, like the feedback, like your actual, like how often did you do this? How likely would you recommend this? I feel, the ranking of I feel comfortable doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I know what this report means, and then incorporating that too, so you can actually say this report got a 6.5 rating. So you can understand too, for your most frequently viewed reports.
Yep.
And even, saying, okay, they've been viewed and then they had the drop off. Maybe it was confusing.
Yep.
Let's figure out why. And I think so. Getting a quality score too, I think is just as important.
It's customer satisfaction. This is like 101. Like you should be able to push that into some sort of process, email all the people using that report, and then say, hey, we'd like you to fill out a survey about this report. And actually soliciting feedback for why they're using it or why they're not.
You know what we've been referring to reports though lately internally? We've been calling them more actually products rather than reports.
You mean you mean data applications? You mean that's what you've been referring to them as?
No, I don't. I do not, so. You can't buy a data application.
What's the difference between a product and a data application and a report? All right, that's a podcast for another time.
Yep, we're at time now. I'm sorry.
New language.
So.
Thank you all. This has been wonderful talking with you.
If you guys want to know that, just comment. We will wait your replies.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we have gone way over. We're over 30 minutes. We're shooting for 30 minutes on these things. So I do think we need to kind of ramp it down here a bit. I think with this topic, this probably actually requires some sort of written up portion of some of the metrics that we've maybe thought up here. So on air here, I will task Tommy. I'll send Tommy my notes, and I'm going to task Tommy with Tommy. Can you write up some of the KPIs that we thought that we discussed? And I have my notes here, so I'll give you the list of what I've got. We'll send you the notes, Tommy. Write it up, blog them out, so that way we can point people to say, hey, we talked about these ideas. Here's the podcast where we explored some of these ideas. Here's some of the KPIs we think that are valuable, because now it'll be really fun because we don't have a mail call or anything yet. People can't email us or anything like that. But maybe in the future, we can put these ideas out there and see if people are finding success with any of these ideas in the future. So I think it would be good to kind of put a stake in the ground and say, like, here's some ideas that may or may not work, and then we'll go from there. And then we'll come back to this topic. I think this is a big topic. I think we're going to have to hit it again a couple times.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
If you search Google for data applications, you will not find my article. I'll tell you that. So, but already got a blog. I already got an article on the on draft that I'm trying to figure out how to write too. But yeah, I think that this would be a great kind of a piece of content to kind of structure and kind of finalize.
All right, I'm gonna have now that challenges me. Now I'm gonna have to write up a little article about what is a data application, a Power BI
No.
data application. That way, when you Google it, it shows up.
Remember you talked about time and not wasting it. So
Oh, true, Tommy.
that's
Zing,
hilarious.
zing, awesome.
Zing.
Excellent, guys. Thank you so much. And this week, my small little voice is happy to be here on the podcast again. I thank you guys so much. It was been a fun conversation, and there'll probably be many more of these. So stay tuned. We'll talk about more things. We don't have a topic for Thursday yet. We're still debating what it will be. But for those of you who have found the podcast, thank you very much. We're right now currently only on YouTube. We're looking at options on moving it into other mediums because people are asking for it now. So I guess that's a KPI for a win here, maybe a little bit. But please like and subscribe. If you subscribe to the YouTube channel, we are trying to pick winners for swag that comes from swag.powerbi.tips. So if you want a free sweater, shirt like this, or something kind of like what Seth's got on, we're giving away free swag. So please like and subscribe, and we'll pick winners every week, and we'll contact you and try and get you some swag. Anyways, thank you all for listening with us or viewing us, depending on what medium you're going to pick us up on, and we'll see you on Thursday.